start soon. Okay, so we're recording. So I am just so thankful to the City of Austin Development Services Department staff for agreeing to do this. They had plans to come into the office to do this class, and then we all got the shelter-in-place order. So I reached out to them and asked if they would consider putting together a webinar for us and doing it virtually, and they agreed. So I really, really appreciate that. There's quite a few city staff that are on this call with us today, so I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves as they either initially now, or if you want to do it when you're ready to do your portion of the presentation, whichever you prefer. So Susan, I think you're the lead, so I'll let you get started.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining, and thank you very much to Allison for reaching out to us for this presentation. And thank you all for your interest and joining us. This presentation is geared towards realtors, and before we get started, I guess I should go over a little bit of the webinar etiquette. So please place yourself on mute, and I guess first of all I should introduce myself, sorry. My name is Susan Barr, and I am the Manager of Residential Plan Review for the City of Austin. So to go back to our webinar etiquette, webcam, please turn off your webcam if you are multitasking. Questions, please submit questions through the chat button on the top right of the screen. If you'd like to ask a question, you can unmute and ask the question, but please remember to mute yourself again when you are done. Pauses. We will pause momentarily throughout the presentation to address questions. Presentation slides. The slides will be shared with you, if applicable. And record, yes, this training is being recorded. So as I mentioned, this presentation is geared towards realtors. It is similar to one that I had presented a couple of years ago at the Austin Board of Realtors, and has a lot of great information for realtors in regards to doing permit and property research. So the topics that we will be going over are kind of a bit of zoning in general for the City of Austin, but then particularly to residential, what can be built at a property, looking at some stress reduction items that can be done prior to, or prior to posting or listing a property, and kind of like the things that come up of like, oh no, unforeseen conditions, or things that might come up as people are interested in the property and find things out about it, like expired permits. The process of permit reactivation, as well as talking about work exempt from permit. And then we'll do an introduction to some really powerful websites that the city has. One is the property profile, and the other one is the AV+C website. And then we'll also be talking about the development process team. So zoning in general. So a city has zones to kind of develop like from a get-go, from in regards to how they want their city to develop and look. So you don't really want to put residential properties next to industrial for health and safety purposes. So super brief on zoning. But in regards to the City of Austin, we have 16 residential zoning districts, 13 commercial districts, 4 industrial districts, and then 5 special purpose based districts. And those special purpose based districts are like the Central Business District and then the North Burnett Gateway District are just a couple of examples. This is a quick look at the property profile tool. My colleague Carol Gibbs will be going into this in much further detail and further on the presentation. So we get a basic question that we get a lot of is what can be built or added at a property? And this really depends on the zoning classification as well as the existing conditions on the property. So on the right of the screen, we have some of the zones residential zoning. So LA is Lake Austin, RR is rural residential, SF1, SF2, and SF3. So each of them, they have their minimum lot size, they have their minimum lot width, max dwelling units, max heights. They also have their different setbacks. And then when we're talking about what can be built or added, we're talking about impervious cover, building coverage, and then floor to area ratio if that is applicable. So to kind of get to the residential permitting processes website, there's a quick link at the top, or if you go to awesometexas.gov, you would then click on development and then click on residential building under building plan review. And the item at the bottom is a great resource to better plan your day if you, and this was before we had our stay home, work safe order put in place, but if you were coming to the building, you could get in line through our customer wait system. And it's like similar to when you're at a restaurant, you kind of put yourself in line without having to be there to wait. And so then as you're finding parking and everything, you then can just plan your day a bit better. So tips to reducing stress before listing a property. One is to look for red flags of the property. The next one is to research the property for expired permits and or code violations. And then the next would be to resolve those items as soon as possible. So in regards to red flags, what we're talking about is like a converted garage. So how would you know if a garage has been converted? The example on the right shows the driveway going up to the house, as well as the differential of materials from the brick to the, looks like maybe some kind of siding, and then the door that's right in the middle, like it just looks kind of different. So if that is a case at a house, you might want to do some research, and maybe it's just a Google Street View, looking through previous years. And then looking at the Austin Build Connect website to do the history search to see if that converted garage had ever been permitted. Also look at windows and or the interior does not match the age of the house, or and that no permit could be found for the date on equipment. So if a new mechanical system gets installed or a water heater, you can see the date on that equipment and then check the Austin Build Connect website to see if a permit was ever pulled to get that changed out. So this is the AB+C website where people can do history search for a property, and Carol is going to be going in more in depth in just a bit. So expired permits. So we have some directions in regards to what can and can't be done with expired permits. So if it was solely a remodel or a standalone trade permit that was issued before March of 2007, then that permit can actually be voided. And so the way we take care of those is that someone will reach out to us, we'll do a brief history, and then we can pretty much void them right there on the spot. If it can't be voided, then it has to be reactivated. And so whenever you've added on to a property, whenever the building coverage and impervious cover has been modified at a property, those permits cannot just be voided, especially, I mean, even if they're from the 1980s, they have to be reactivated and then closed out. If it has not been reactivated in the past, not a problem, it can be reactivated. If it has received a previous reactivation and it has not passed the framing inspection, then we do need to do a review of the project in order to allow it to move forward to get reactivated again. And if it can't be reactivated again, then I'd have to go through the permitting process. And the reason why it wouldn't be able to be reactivated again is because the code has changed from when it was permitted to what the code is now. That hasn't happened yet to date. Also, the age of a permit might qualify it for a life safety inspection once it is reactivated. So when we talk about life safety inspections, we're looking at Chapter 3 of the International Residential Code, which outlines the minimum life safety requirements in regards to tempered glass, sizes of egress windows, sizes of the egress door, rise and run of stairs, and things like that. But in regards to expired permits, when they do get reactivated, this might be on, okay. Sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Basically, we look at the year the permit was issued and what the code requirements were at that time. And then sorry, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so I'll just wait for that. Anyway, to reactivate an expired permit, if a contractor has an AB plus C account and they are tied to that permit, they can reactivate it online. If there is no ABC account, then the form to the right needs to be emailed to permitsubmittal@austintexas.gov. So the inspection process. So once the permit has been reactivated, inspections are to be scheduled. Inspections will be conducted under the code in place at the time the permit was pulled. And we do have permit history for all the ordinances at the time when they were approved and went into effect for each of the technical codes back to the 30s. So we can look to see the ordinance that put that code in place and find out which code is applicable. We also have a copy of every code book since the 1930s, so we can also look at that. Any applicable reactivation fees will need to be paid prior to the final building inspection being scheduled. And then it really just comes down to working with the inspector in the field to resolve outstanding issues at the property. So work exempt from permit. This comes from the International Residential Code, which is the technical code in which houses are constructed. And it has a pretty short section. And so what we do is we look at those and we build upon them or we modify them based on Austin. And what we try to do every time we adopt a new code is look to see how we can expand these and make more work to be able to be done without a permit. So there's 3 slides of these, and for time's sake, I'm not going to go over all of them, but just maybe hit the top ones. First one-story detached accessory structure, like a shed in the backyard that is no more than 200 square feet. It can be built without a permit as long as it is not more than 15 feet in height, does not create a dwelling, contains no plumbing, and is not located within a flood hazard area. A fence also can be built without a permit as well if it is not more than 8 feet high. Now there are some code requirements for that fence, so those still need to be followed, as well as the detached accessory structure. It still needs to be placed appropriately on the property. Even though it doesn't need a permit, you still have to follow the zoning guidelines in regards to setbacks and things. We also have gypboard repair that does not exceed 64 square feet. Asphalt shingles can replace asphalt shingles without a permit. Foundation repair, floor decking, not exceeding 64 square feet. Siding, not exceeding 64 square feet, roof decking, and replacing or installing an overhead garage door on a garage does not require a permit. And now I will turn it over to our development process team.
Hi, good morning. My name is Sandra Castillo. I am part of the newly developed process team with Development Services. We're part of the Stakeholder and Community Engagement Unit. We were just created this past year to support homeowners, small businesses, and large-scale affordable housing projects. In total, there will be 5 of us. Currently, with everything that's going on, there's 3 of us. I'm the lead with the homeowners. Cole Hubbard and Natalie Rodriguez currently support small businesses, and we have a vacant position for affordable housing. Our overall goal is to provide continuous support and assistance in all matters relating to development regulations and process and procedures. Next slide, please. So outside of providing support and functioning as a resources for the 3 that I identified, we also are going to host community and stakeholder engagement activities to receive feedback. We want to hear from you guys. We want to hear from the community on what is working and what is not working in our development process. Are there constant hurdles that we see these particular entities going through? Are there changes that we could help make? And we will take this feedback and recommend, initiate, and lead department-wide process improvements based on the feedback we received, not only from you guys, but internally as well within our department. Next slide. Specifically for the homeowners and small businesses, we provide an optional service to them to navigate the review process, the permitting process, the inspection process. So basically from beginning to end, we're here to provide information about the development process. You might get people in different stages of the development process. They got a project approved, but they don't know what to do next. You can send them our way. They are in the inspection process and don't know where to begin. You can send them our way. They have a code violation that they're trying to figure out how to address and they don't know where to start. You would send them our way. We're really here to offer a single point of contact for the duration of the project and actually connect these homeowners and small businesses to the right resources every step of the way. We are not the technical experts. Susan, her team are amazing. They provide an amazing service. We're not taking anything away from that. We're just offering an optional level of support to make sure we're connecting our homeowners and small businesses and get them to the end of their project. We do, in our normal world, we provide walk-in services Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday from 8 to noon at the second floor in the One Texas Center. Right now in our telework world, we're providing those services via phone conferences or teleconferences. We set a phone line that you could reach us at. Customers can leave a message and we'll call them back. We set up an email address for them as well if they want to email and they don't know where to start or they just need guidance what direction they could go to. They could also email our team. We currently have a website. It's our goal is to make it more robust, to make sure that there are flow charts. We're eventually going to put flow charts and just different information on there on where to start. So it'll just be a tool for homeowners, small businesses, and people just in general going through the process on how they could navigate different aspects of the development services world. And then we're going to send it over to Carol. She'll be the next one to go over some live models on how to navigate the ABC Plus portal as well as property profile.
All right.
Susan, and I muted you, Susan. Somebody asked if a permit is required for a hot water heater or a water heater.
Yes, a permit is required for a hot water heater.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions we need to prepare for before I get started, or do you want to take a pause for anything else right now?
No. Does anyone else have any questions? That was the only question I saw in the chat. Somebody's asking if the slides will be available. Carol, will you guys be able to provide the slides besides the recording?
Yes, we will. What we can do is send it over to Allison as a PDF, and you can send it to the powers that be.
Great, thank you.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and put my desktop up here shortly. I do want to raise the question, though, is the recording going to record the video also, or just the audio? Will what I show on my desktop be captured, or
yes?
No?
Yes.
Okay.
It will show people what they're seeing. Yeah, it will record what's being presented. And Carol, if you could just introduce yourself to folks and what your position is within the department.
Sure. I am Carol Gibbs. I am actually now the neighborhood advisor for the Development Services Department. I can help folks, neighborhood associations with concerns about other, that fall into the purview of other departments. But in terms of really seeing the issue through and making sure they get a resolution, I'm kind of confined to the Development Services Department's issues and responsibilities. So kind of primarily a neighborhood service, neighborhood level service. But certainly if someone feels like there's no place else to go, they're welcome to give me a call and I'll help them find where they need to be and try to get them there. So I'm going to switch over now to my desktop, and hopefully I'm kind of new at this, so hopefully this will work. So hopefully you guys can all now see the property profile. Allison, can you verify that for me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and I made my mouse cursor a little bit bigger and fancier so that you can hopefully follow it, because it's going to be my driving tool. Allison will share with y'all, or I think actually maybe Susan's slide had, I don't remember if it had the URL here, but y'all don't need to worry about. Okay, you don't need to worry about capturing it here. But once you do go to this website, this is what you will first see in the property profile. And there's some initial explanatory information here in the left panel. But up here, these tabs, and then under each tab, these icons are going to be your primary area of operation. The default view is going to come up to search and identify first, because that's pretty much the main tab that you will be using. When you first load this, it will take a minute to load if you've not used property profile before. Once you have used it, then it will load much more quickly each time you open it. I just already had it open here. So quickly, just want to orient you to these tabs, getting around. This is where your pan feature is, some other typical GIS type tools here. I'm not going to click on every one of them because it actually I thought I wasn't going to have as much time as we still have, but I want to leave the majority to questions. But I encourage you to navigate around each of these once you get on it yourself and can play with it. As I said, search and identify, these are the main tools I'm going to show you today. There's drawing options. This took me a while to master, but the help documents are really useful there. Printing and reporting, there's the property profile report, which I hope to remember to touch on here in a minute. And then the help tab has a bunch of different options here that I want you to not forget about. There's the quick start, there's the user guide. There are about a dozen training videos that the designers of this tool have created to help you navigate exactly how to do various steps, some of the more common ones, but also some of the more complicated ones, but that are have been requested, are popular, like drawing a buffer tool around a property. What's new gets updated each time they add another feature. The layer list is basically looks like a document of the same layers that we will show in the left-hand panel here shortly. Feedback survey, that's always important to us for making improvements. And then support triggers an email to the designers of this tool where you can ask them for help, and they're very responsive. So I'm going to go back to search and identify and click on the change visible layers. Those of you who are familiar at all with GIS, this is GIS based. It's GeoCortex. I call this, because I use this rather than using ArcGIS, I call it the 8th grade level, kind of like newspapers write for the 8th grade. To me, this is about the level that I can handle GIS. And, it's just kind of a distilled, most commonly used, much more, I call it stable. I guess idiot proof would be more appropriate to me. I don't get lost. I don't worry about losing stuff. I just start over when I get in over my head or get somewhere I don't recognize where I'm at. So specifically for residential projects, we chose an address that has a few expired permits on it because that was something that Allison asked that we help y'all with, because that's a common, I guess, kind of trip up for new home buyers. It's also obviously something that a seller may not even realize. Maybe there were expired permits before they bought the property and didn't know it because that was like 20 years ago, or maybe they paid contractors to do all the work and close out the permits and get the finals, and maybe we're told that things were finalized and cleared out, but indeed they weren't. So you always want to check for expired permits on a property. So I'm going to click on address search. I could also do permits by address, but I'm going to do address search just for grins. And the address that we're going to look at is 5611 Woodview. And you'll notice as I start typing, it's so smart. It pulls up everything with 5611 starting with a W. Obviously, there's a lot more street names that start with W, but these are the only ones that have a 5600 block in them with that specific address. This tool requires that you wait for it to find your address before you expect it to find the property. If I were to race through this and just do Woodview Avenue, for example, it will never find it because it doesn't know it as Woodview Avenue. It knows it as Woodview Ave. So I always suggest that you not even type out the full name and let it find maybe even a few names first, and then you pick the one that you want. You always have to click submit, and then it will find the property. As you notice, it zoomed way in. So with your mouse or with these plus and minuses, you can zoom in and out on the map without zooming in and out on your browser tool or on your browser zoom. You'll notice the zoom here. I'm on Chrome, which by the way is what Property Profile prefers. I won't vouch for any other browsers, although I think they do work. In fact, as frustrating as it is, I can use Property Profile on my iPhone on Safari. It's not meant for a mobile tool, but once you know how to do Property Profile, you can make it work in a pinch. But this is how you can zoom in and out to make the non-map real estate smaller so that you can maximize the real estate of your map on the screen. And then within the map, you can zoom in and out to the property. When I turn on, well, before I do the different layers, I want to show you that once I do find an address here, it pulls up all kinds of information in this left panel. The zoning, the council district. Here's a link to that property profile report that can also be created under the printing and reporting tab. Zoning profile, which is another separate standalone tool that we now have, but is soon going to go away because property profile will be able to do everything that it does. Appraisal district, that's a direct link to the TCAD record. In this case, if it were a Hayes or Williamson County property, it would link you to their record. And then the Flood Pro map, again, also GeoCortex based, looks just like this for the most part. It has different layers. So if you're specifically looking for floodplain area information, you'd want to look at that. Scrolling down here again is, I think that's TCAD information, maybe not. But here is more information: annexation, the subdivision that it's in, the community registry, registered organizations in whose boundaries this property sits. And when you scroll through here, I'll just touch on this quickly, you will notice if you look at each one, you can find the contact information on them. But also you'll notice some of these, like, well, you wouldn't know it without looking at it, but Bike Austin, ANC, Austin Lost and Found Pets, AISD, those are all pretty much citywide organizations, whereas Allendale Neighborhood Association pretty much stands out, and in this case I can vouch for it, is a pretty much the smallest neighborhood organization, and therefore the one that an owner would want to talk to if they were wanting to rezone a property or do something kind of dramatic that they might want to vet the neighbors' objections early on. And then as you scroll down, here's kind of a summary view of permits. And this view does a good job of sorting out the expired permits from all the others. When we look at ABC, and even in a different view on this tool, we will have a little more trouble finding the expired permits amongst all the others because they will be more date ordered than they are by expired or other types. So again, this view is your quickest way to see that there are expired permits, but there's other ways to view that as well. We will look at a couple of these here in a minute, but I also wanted to show you that in this change visible layers view, there's this option up here. This everywhere there's a drop down arrow like that, it means you've got some options to consider. And in the course, in the case of residential reviews, the residential reviewers have this it's kind of a pre-packaged set of layers that was built with Susan's input to include all the different layers that the residential reviewers look at in a course of a permit submission. You hopefully saw that little symbol down here that showed layers were loading. When that's happening, please don't ask Property Profile to do anything. It will get confused like this. Just let it cook when it's loading. So this will show you the kinds of things that residential reviewers will need to look at. For example, these are easement lines. So there's not any on this property that I pulled up, but if it were one of these properties we were looking at, your buyer, your owner, whatever, would want to know that there are all these easements and they would want to look at them and see what that entails. Again, zooming in will show you more detail. Sometimes when we zoom out, these layers on the left will, let me show you, for example, we can see addresses now, but when I zoom out, addresses are going to be unseeable. And, well, yeah, see how that went gray here. Now when I zoom back in, addresses become visible. And so if you're looking at the map and you can't see the address, look over at the left bar and see if it's grayed out. And if it is, it just means you need to zoom in to display it. So it is telling what it's doing, but sometimes it's hard to know where to look to see what it's telling you, if that makes sense. Okay, so here I am again. Here's my property. I got lost there for a second, but when you zoom back out, you find it because it has that little bullseye on it and the outline around it. But if you're like me, this makes me dizzy. It's useful information, but it makes me dizzy to work in it. And I'm probably making y'all dizzy by driving my little pointer all around, and I'll try to minimize that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this selection of layers, and I'm going to go back to all available layers, the default, because its default is to have only a very few features displayed. And I'm going to explain that here in just a second. I'm going to look at my notes right quick. Oh, one thing I want to point out up here before I get too much further into navigating this particular case is that, again, if you're kind of worried about the history of a property and you know there was an add-on sometime in the back, but you don't know when, our current default for what shows up in these footprints you can see in the background, these building footprints or the dark gray splotches, you can go back and turn on one of these. I'm not going to do it for now just because it takes some time to load, but you can go back to 2012, 2006, 1987, and hopefully see when that addition or when that cabana in the backyard shows up. Again, you can't, obviously we don't have every year, but you can certainly estimate, well, it was there in 2003, or well, it wasn't there in 2003, but it was there in 97. So we've got a window at least of when we know it happened. And then of course there's aerials and tree canopies. Again, not every year, but can be useful. Let's see, what else? Okay, so I'm going to also show you this panel actions menu. Depending on what we have showing in the map, layers that are turned on, actions that we're doing, this panel actions menu has different contents under it when you click on it. Standard is, you know, just that it's going to show the legend and that we can change the display, the order in which the different layers are displayed. And those of you who know GIS know that the drawing order, the order in which these layers are listed here, can affect the visibility of some of the features. And so what you can do is move these up and down. You know, grab it and move it up or down. This other feature showing the legend means that you can see the different color codes for those things that display in colors, or like the hatch marking we saw earlier. And that can be very helpful. You can also see the jurisdiction was that example. You can also click on, anytime they have that little icon, that means there is a legend. And my mouse has a hard time getting it to open up, but there are those different colors, and that means they're outlined. Tell you what, I'm going to turn on full purpose. Actually, full purpose is already on, but I've got it opaque. I mean, transparent. If I slide it to the left, it should make it more opaque. Yes, see that? Turned yellow. Well, okay, so it, all right, I take that back. Anyway, play with it. You can figure it out yourself, which as you can tell, I am still doing. But each one of these plus signs can be popped open, and you can see all the layers under each one to turn on and turn off. You can also do a search here. For example, instead of having to search under permits to see which of these permits I want to turn on, I can also type in here building permits, and it automatically finds it for me. And I can check it. And again, here's a legend. And there are the different colors for the different statuses. Oh my goodness, look at all those permits all over the city. Again, I don't want that on there because it makes it too busy. So I will uncheck it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to 5611 right here. And show you the property profile report right quick. It does take a minute or so to generate, but it's a very useful tool that you can, if you don't want to have to do, how do I say this? If you don't want to do all their fishing for them, you can either do, well, you can do this, create this yourself and send it to them, or you can, you know, tell your buyers or sellers that they can do this themselves on each of, any property they're interested in. So I'm going to download this, and you can save it here, download it and save it as a PDF. And it's just a one-page document that has real cute graphics on the right, the map orientation, and the current. It says current. I believe it's 2017 or maybe 2018 aerials, but relatively current. And again, here's all the information that we saw in that left panel, and some additional stuff, such as the fact that Allendale, even though it doesn't have a neighborhood plan, it has some restricted parking conditions, and it has some conditions about the mobile food vendors, both of which are we could call them kind of overlays that affect parking, parking permits. No, it's not parking permits. It's whether or not they can park in their front yard without getting cited for parking violations. And then this is about whether or not mobile food vendors can be too close to residential properties. Here are a bunch of links to resources about zoning. Sorry, shouldn't have highlighted that. And how they can go about getting a zoning verification letter if they want to basically prove, or have the city vouch for what the zoning is. They can request a zoning verification letter. And again, here's a guide to zoning here. It's very useful to understanding what's SF2 versus SF3. And if your property was in a neighborhood planning area, you could read up on everything about it from that link. So go back to property profile. Now I'm going to close the report. And we are going to look at permits by address now. Again, I could have gotten to them from the way I searched by address here earlier, but now I've gotten myself out of there. So I'm just going to re-enter 5600 Woodview and choose it. Here you can also choose buffers. In different searches, it doesn't allow you, I think in review, if we were doing a review case search, it wouldn't offer you the option of no buffer. It would your choices would be which of these other distances. But when we are interested in just one property, the no buffer is handy. Hope I'm not going too fast or making people too dizzy with this mouse. Again, I have to let it be to do its searching. Sometimes this will give you a little error that says certain layers didn't load. If you want, you can X out of that error and continue and see if the layers that you wanted did load. Don't consider it as an error message that's telling you that property profile is locked up and can't work anymore. Close it and start over. It rarely does that. It's usually just that a default layer in whatever view that you're in is having problems. And oftentimes that's a layer that I'm not even looking for. Okay, so here are all permits, and you'll notice it popped them up down here below the map, which depending on your view of the map, you can and how many permits it brings you, you can make that table bigger or smaller. You can also go to this panel actions menu and switch so that it goes back over to the left side, displays on the left panel instead of down here below. But and again, here's some other options, like we can export all these permits to an Excel file or CSV if you prefer, but export it to an Excel file. There's a shape file. There's further things that I haven't played with myself, but for right now, we're going to stay right here, not switch to list, and just look at these permits. So issued building permits, issued electrical permits, mechanical, plumbing, and other. Now I point out other because in other search types you might do, you could possibly, well, actually even here, their code enforcement complaints show up here. And you'll notice you can slide all the way over to the right and find all other kinds of tabs of information depending on what you're looking for. And then you can also X out, close out some of these tabs that maybe aren't relevant to you so that you can see everything in one screen that is relevant to you. So it's very, very versatile. I'm going to go back to building permits and just click on one of these links. You'll notice they're hyperlinked. It turns my pointer into a finger. And that is going to take me into ABC, the actual permit database. Before we do that, I want to point out one more thing, and that is that if we had a dozen or more permits here that you weren't interested in and you did want to just have the expired ones, you could click on here and remove one of these items from this list, and it would literally delete this row. I'm not going to do it right now. Again, very dynamic, lots of options here we're not going to be able to have time to cover today. So I'm clicking on the permit detail, and it's going to take me straight to that permit. I'll show you in a minute. I should have known I would take up all the rest of the time. I'll show you in a minute how to get here independently from property profile, but this just shows you that you can almost find everything you need in property profile, and it will take you to ABC when you need to get there. So this permit was for a partial demolition to extend the kitchen, backyard, dining, living area, etc. It expired because it had a 180-day life cycle, and they didn't do, maybe they never started the project and just abandoned it. But if they did do it, they did not get inspections in time to keep that permit alive past its initial, actually that's more than 180 days. So again, Susan's expert on these life cycles of permits, but maybe it's more than 180 days and maybe they got some extensions and stuff. But scrolling way down, you can, sorry, I went too fast. Scrolling down, you can see all kinds of specific information that was extracted from the application that they submitted, and see square footage of the lot, setback requirements, what code they have to comply with, no pipeline in the area, no neighborhood plan. Sometimes this information is submitted wrong by the applicant, and what's entered into here is from the application. So if this were an active case and somebody found that, oh, wait a minute, this isn't a neighborhood plan, they need to comply with all those details, you can always call the reviewer. Well, you can call me and I can help figure out, get that changed. Here is the course of inspections. It looks like they did have inspections for a little while, and then for some reason they dropped it. So they may have gone ahead and built it. It's hard to know. Oh, here's a reactivation. So that explains why that they must have had a 1-year life cycle, and just before they got to the end of it, they reactivated it for 180 days and then apparently didn't do anything with it before the final expiration. Here is an attachment, the one attachment that they have on this case. And again, public record. You can view all the, in this case, this one only has one page, but oftentimes the, if it's a PR, a plan review case that you're looking at, there are lots of attachments down there. We're going to go back to this one and we're going to look at the second one. And this one is to replace windows. Again, it expired, sounds like same deal. and also reactivated it. Let me show you. This is the initial page of Austin Building Connect. Again, the URL's provided. This is what you would come to, and you'll notice right here there's a link right up front for how to use public search. There's a really valuable page in there. I've already pulled it up. Page 11 of 12 shows you an explanation of all the different acronyms that we use in the naming of zoning, or of all permits and cases. The prefix, what the case number could start with, and suffixes that could be at the end of a case number, depending on what kind of case or permit it is. And yes, we have two different ways of referring to cases. We have reference file names and case type names. And I believe that's as a result of us having had a different database previously, and we had to find a way to kind of consolidate when we came to this one. Sorry about that. Okay, so if you have a permit number and it starts with a year, you can search it here and click submit. If you have a case number or permit, whatever you call it, and it starts with it's typically 2 or maybe 3 digits, but it's not the year, you search for it here and click submit. When you're searching for it by address, here is where you would search. And I've already stuck in the 5611 Woodview address just so I wouldn't make typos in front of you. But notice here, I've got a space at the end of the address. Had I copied and pasted this, for example, from Google search and just cut the number out and pasted it over here, it would not, this search would not find it. I'm not going to do it right now. You have to not have a space at the front or back end of either the address or the street name. And that is just a persnickety thing about this database that, I wish it didn't have, but it does. So if you ever search for an address and you get no hits, make sure that you don't have ghost spaces in either of these fields. I never use street type. I never use zip. I never use unit type, because if any of this information is already also in the record, it will find it anyway, even with just this little, just the street number and the street name. In fact, if you don't know the exact address, you can just do street name.
Carol, can I interrupt real quick for putting in street names? A question, because I think I've had this problem before. Is the numbered streets, what is the best to use for numbered streets?
Good point. So if it's north, south, east, or west, you pick it. You don't put it in here. It's not going to be West 7th. It's going to be a W there, and then here it's going to be the number and then TH or ST or RD or whatever. This little question mark takes you to a help page that explains some of our naming conventions, the correct versus the incorrect. This one is really squirrely, does not make sense to you. The other kind of challenge is that TCAD has a different way of having you search for their street numbers. They, I think, want you to search for 906 22nd. Well, I don't remember their situation on the map, but anyway, they don't have the west and north south acronym in their searches. So don't assume that you can search by TCAD's methodology, because it's not the same. And again, at West 7th, you don't want street here. I would not, again, wouldn't choose the street type. But in some cities where there's a street and then, there's 7th Street and 7th Avenue, you might need to, but luckily we don't do that here. So I'll leave that blank. And again, we don't have, actually we do have northbound and southbound IH-35, but again, I always do IH-35. That's our standard. And then if I find both a northbound and a southbound, I can figure out which one it is from my results. Does that help, Allison?
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for the ask. Okay. One other thing is this message down here explains that we have a 1-year default window. Normally this would say 2019, but I've already changed it to 1980. The reason we do that is so that if you mistakenly forget to enter any data up here in these boxes or in these permit case type boxes, and you just hit submit without doing anything, if we didn't limit it to 1 year, you would crash the system because it would be searching for everything for all the way back. Once you have put a specific address or selected a specific case type, which I'm not going to do this time because I want to find all permits, but if you were just looking for building permits, you could do that. Then you can push the date back and you can literally just retype it, or you can go to the calendar and pick it, either whatever your choice is. Then click submit. This date range does not apply to these methods of searching. Obviously, if you have the exact case number, you don't need a date range to help you narrow it, to find it. So I've clicked submit, and now here is the way we see basically all those same permits that we saw in property profile. We're seeing them here in this table. And here's the example I was explaining earlier. Here's some expireds, here's an approved, here's final. It's just, if you want to export data or sort, property profile is by far the better way to do that, at least for now. This tool is always getting tweaked and you know, new versions rolled out. So I won't say it'll never be able to be sorted or exported from here, but for right now, it's not. Here's an example of a building permit that was actually finalized. They added 2 bathrooms and a bedroom, and it's got related permits. This is a way for you to see all the permits that were related to one case without having to look for each of them separately. So here it says related folders or folder, yes. And there's a plumbing permit. So related folders is kind of a strange thing because sometimes there's multiple cases at an address, but if it's not related, like in this case, to the building permit, if it was an out in the yard, say irrigation permit system being installed, it wouldn't be related, so to speak, to the building permit for interior work. So you've got to not assume everything's related, but some things are. Again, details, back in the day, you can see there weren't as many details posted in these things as the one I showed you just more recently. Oh, the back to search results I just did. There is a back button at the bottom of every page in ABC. You do not want to use your browser back arrow to navigate through ABC. Same with property profile. Both of them are very picky about when you use the browser back arrow, you are leaving the program you're in. So that's a tough lesson to learn sometimes if you're real attached to your browser back arrow. But definitely just use the back button inside these tools. Let me think. As usual, I'm covered a lot, but I probably missed a lot. Anybody want to, either Susan or Allison, want to prompt me on something else specific to look at?
I don't know, maybe does anybody have a property that they'd be interested in looking at? You can put that in the chat.
Or a view that you'd like to look
Yeah.
at again, because I was zipping in and out so quickly.
Just give folks a second to respond.
Yeah. I'm gonna close some of these windows.
Not getting anything on the chat.
Susan, is there anything you'd like me to rehash?
No, I don't think so, but I can comment in regards to the expiration date and why there's a differential of more than 180 days between the two. Is that whenever you call an inspection and it passes, it extends the life of the permit and all associated permits for another 180 days. So project can continue for literally years as long as someone just keeps calling in inspections, and it extends life 180 days. And then one thing in regards to the year 1980, 1980 is when the city of Austin started keeping track of permits in a database system. And so that's why we take it back to 1980. But in reality, the city of Austin started keeping track of permits in the late 1930s. And so if there is a property that has that older permit history on it, well, actually you can't come in person at this time, but there is a research section of the Development Assistance Center, and they can look up that older permit history through that division.
Thank you.
Carol, we've got an address somebody would like to look up. 3402 Dolphin Drive.
Do we want to do it on property profile or on ABC? Does it matter? I'll do property profile.
Yeah. Okay. And then there was a question. Do you know if Williamson County has this type of a website?
If it is an Austin, City of Austin in Williamson County, they can use this tool.
Okay.
If it's a Round Rock or Georgetown, I don't know.
Okay. So, and this is everything that is within city limits or within the ETJ,
this property profile shows ETJ, limited jurisdiction, you know, it even shows, let me show you here. It even shows other city limits and other cities' ETJs. So if we zoom way out here, we will see the different colors. Now the permits won't show up if we don't have authority over those kind of permits, like building permits in the ETJ. I don't think we do those, but we do some site plan reviews in the ETJ. So if you look in here and you don't find some, excuse me, find a permit you're looking for, consider that it may be that.
Okay.
Okay, so tell me again the address. Did I get it right? 3402?
Dolphin.
02?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it popped up Dolphin Drive, so I know that's the one I want. Okay. Do we want to know anything in particular, expired permits or anything in particular about it?
Let's see, Leah, was there anything in particular you were looking for, or just generally if there were permits?
Just generally, overall.
Okay. So it looks like in 2012 they got an electrical They did some electrical work and got it inspected and it cleared. Another thing this is useful for is, for example, I don't know about this case, but if you were showing this house and you knew, or looking at it with the client, and you knew that they've added something onto it, say, you know, something out front, extended this front living room or something, the fact that there is no reference to that permit here might suggest that maybe they did some work without a permit. So the absence of a permit history can sometimes tell you almost as much as finding a permit in here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so what do you do in that case?
I'm sorry?
So what do you do in that case if you assume that there was an addition to the house without the permit?
That's probably a question for Susan.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Susan, what would it mean for a property owner or somebody who's considering buying a property if they believe that there is work that was done without a permit? What might that mean to them in the future?
Well, it is not known to the city if work was done without a permit until it is brought to the city's attention, which is usually what happens is code violations are issued with neighbors calling on neighbors when work is being done without a permit. If it is found that, say, it's being listed and the person that's interested in buying it finds that it was something was done without a permit, they might require a permit be obtained prior to close, or there's all kinds. You guys know all about kind of how properties are sold, and the stipulations that buyers and sellers can make to each other to close the deal. So it just basically needs to be permitted as if it hadn't been built yet. But we know, and inspections knows that it has already been built. The thing is that work built without a permit gets permitted under the code that is in place at the time the application is submitted, not at the thought time about when it might have been built.
So that could be an issue if it was not built to code, either zoning code or building code, because then it may be that it's not able to get a permit. Is that correct?
Correct. So it might mean that they have to go to the Board of Adjustments to ask for a variance. Say, like it happens where people build carports in their front yard setback, so that's closer to their front lot line than 25 feet for an SF3 zone property. And so with that, then there's the option of removing it or seeing if you can get a variance. But you have to remember that when you seek a BOA variance, a Board of Adjustment variance, it has to be particular to that property and some kind of hardship. And a financial hardship is not the kind of hardship that they're looking at, because a variance is particular to a property, because if they're going to allow it on that property, then they could allow carports in the front yard setback on all of them. So then it's not really a variance.
And that's a long process to go through that.
It can
And
be
expensive. Very expensive.
Yes, and so some hardships are trees or topography, and so those are kind of like the hardships that they take into account.
And just for further clarification, say somebody bought a property that had unpermitted work, and then they wanted to get work done on their home. Say they wanted to do a remodel or an addition. That's when another time when the city, it would come to the city's notice that there had been unpermitted work. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And so at that time, it would need to be permitted and rolled into that scope description to get resolved.
Cool. Thank you, Susan. So one more thing that Allison had asked me to show y'all, or I think Susan had asked me to show y'all, is that when we're in this residential review view, and maybe it's available in other views as well, but if you right click on the property that you're looking at, you can do all these things. Like you could even, add some cute text if you wanted to then send a picture to somebody. But you can find data. And you see how it below the map, let me pull this up a little so you can see it better. There's all kinds of data that it populates this table with. I don't know what the lot line's going to, yeah, it's not going to show anything, but the recorded subdivision, that might be useful for deed restrictions research. Floodplain, no floodplain here. Here's the little cursor arrow the arrow to scan over to the right for other data. Just look at all this. So a lot of research. Here's the, I'm not sure it's a link. Yeah, okay. That's the McMansion ordinance, what we call McMansion, but it's subchapter F of the Land Development Code. Zoning is SF3. So again, just tons of information that you can find here if you know that it's there, or if you know where to look. And again, I didn't even know about that until Susan asked me to display it today.
And also one thing to note about that is if you see an easement, or you can also drill down on those layers. So when you have it zoomed in and you see that there's an easement, you can actually put your cursor over that dashed line, do a right click and say find data on map, and it'll tell you more about that easement or more about that particular item on the property. And the other thing to note is that the bottom information that came up with all the results, if the layers is closed, that will also populate on the left-hand side in a column format.
Oh, okay. I'm reloading it because I got myself lost again. There it all is. Can't even see the property throughout it.
Oh, here, somebody's suggesting looking at 2001 Mestena Trail. They have an easement on their property, so you could show how that easement information is shown.
Okay, 2001.
Yes, and it's Mestena, M-E-S-T-E-N-A. There it is. We're going to find out everything about Jessica's property.
Hey y'all, I can elaborate on my property if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay, so we bought our land back in 03, excuse me, and then built the house and realized we couldn't access it from Miami Drive. And our address, as you can see on the screen there, says that 1811 Miami Drive should exist. That street that's at the bottom of my property there.
Right here.
That does not exist. It's all woods. Definitely not there. So when we came into the land, and you can see topographically that I'm on a hill, you see the waves of it. So my easement actually goes across lot 14, which it was just on the screen. So it's at the top of the screen. If you scroll, yeah, it goes across 14, 14, and 12.
So you have an easement across somebody else's land as opposed to somebody having an easement on your land.
Yes.
So that may not be something the city records because that could be a private easement agreement.
Oh, okay. Okay. But
yeah, the city, there are lots of different types of, there's easements and covenants that can be private agreements between property owners, and the city doesn't have any jurisdiction over those. So they don't enforce those easements and covenants. They have to be enforced through the courts.
Okay. Is there a way to change the fact that Miami Drive does not continue to Lipan over here? I mean, everybody ges lost every every driver, every UPS driver, they all get lost. They try to come through Lipan and it doesn't connect.
I don't know, city staff, is that something that's an addressing issue? Is that something that development services deals with, or is that something that is emergency services?
It's emergency services. It's more like right-of-way management with Austin Transportation Department and Public Works. There have been instances where, say, someone wants to take access from their alley, but it is an alley that the city does not maintain. So if they want to do that, then Public Works requires them to pave their part of the alley all the way to the street.
Okay. Yeah, we actually just paved our street that came off of Saratoga and went across those 3 lots, 14, 12, and 13. And we actually own 13, 12, 10, and 9. We own those 4 lots. So yeah, the easement, it's just interesting. It's just a weird situation. So that's why I wanted to kind of see what you guys had to say about it.
Yeah, that's definitely a unique situation.
Right.
Any other questions?
You might, I just have a thought about the addressing thing. If you're concerned about people being able to find you, especially if that were to apply to EMS and police and fire, you could Google 911 addressing on the city's website. And there's contact information there for you to reach out to them and see if what they keep in their system, if they've got what they need on your address.
Yeah, thank you for that. My husband has been very active with all of the above, and so he has done that. It was more so just like Google Maps, and any drawn maps always come in the wrong way. So of course, any delivery drivers get lost, or Uber drivers when we Uber again. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate the info.
Also want to show you this little text box that shows up when you're identifying a property. See this 2 of 5? It's telling me that there are 5 layers of information on this parcel. I don't know what that one is, but it's MapScope page number, TCAD parcel information, the recorded subdivision. You can view additional details. You can remove this layer of data from the results. MapScope grid again. And the more layers you have turned on when you're looking at a property in this way, the more items that show up here that you can then scroll through, or you can do it this way. Here's the same 5 layers to find out about that property. Everybody's brain exploding.
Lots of ways to navigate. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if there aren't any other questions, then we could wrap up. Thank you guys so much. I think it's going to be really helpful to the agents in knowing how to find information that they can then share with their clients, and also to know that there's the process team that can be helpful to property owners if they're considering a project.
Great. Well, thank you once again for everyone attending and participating.
Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.